Introducing our Kent County Clerk, Lisa Postumus Lyons. Come on up, Lisa. And then my friend and fellow Michigan Advisory Council for Keep Our Republic, Chris Trebilcock, who is an attorney for Clark Hill and one of those foremost election attorneys in the state of Michigan. I'd also like to invite Joe DeMarco, who is a Kent County voter and also working firsthand as an election poll worker. Come on up, Joe. And then I want to recognize a couple of our local clerks here. We've got Michelle Alberts from Grattan Township. We've got Chantel Ford from Virgins Township and Karen Hendrick from Bound Township.
Woo, Bound.
I almost said Brown. It says Brown, but I know it's Bound. So, all right. Well,
Sorry, they're all awesome. This is fun.
We'll get this started. So, Madam Clerk, this first question is for you, and really just start off with a general overview of the electoral process.
Sure.
What does it look like for a voter?
Well, first, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for putting this event together and bringing us all together. If there's one thing I learned after the election in 2020 is that we really need to educate the public. I used to view my role as the county clerk not as an activist, but as an administrator. But since 2020, I've kind of embraced this new role as an ambassador for elections because I want people to have faith in their elections. They're the bedrock of our republic, and I truly believe that education, transparency, and participation are the keys to having a secure, fair, and accurate and transparent election. So I'm really glad to have these opportunities to go and just help educate our public, teach them about the process, because elections are more than election day. And clerks up here, feel free to jump in at any time if there's anything you want to add. But we're beginning the process months ahead of election day, and it's a very transparent process. We want the public to come in and watch and view. A lot of it's open meetings, so under Open Meetings Act and things like that. So. Before the election, we're working with our local clerks to make sure we have everything on the ballot that's supposed to be on the ballot, it's correct. And then we're mailing these ballots out while absentee ballots are kind of in the field among the voters. This is the time where our local clerks are testing their equipment. We test equipment before every single election. And again, it's open to the public to make sure that our election equipment is functioning properly, that it's tallying votes properly, and that it's zeroed out before election day, before they start tabulating votes on the ballots. So the testing of our equipment before the election is really, really important, as well as you're dealing with absentee ballots. There's been a lot of changes since just since 2022, since 2018, and I think you're going to touch on a lot of them. But we want to make sure that absentee ballots are going to the correct individual. And what we do is before the ballots are, once they're received, before they're accepted, our local clerks will check the signature that's on the back of the envelope to make sure that it matches the signature that's on file in our qualified voter file, in the voter rolls. So that's a critical check and balance in our process when it comes to absentee voting. We can talk about election day. There's so many really important things that go into that process, not the least of which is actually administering the election. Our local clerks have what they're called election inspectors. They're Republicans and they're Democrats in each precinct to basically run that precinct's election. It's like we're having thousands of mini elections throughout the whole state because Michigan's very decentralized, which again I think is a notch in our belt in terms of integrity and security. On election day, it's really important. Again, we have the bipartisan election inspectors, but poll challengers play a very critical role in our process. I think sometimes they get a bad reputation or they're viewed as kind of this adversarial nature. I tend to disagree. Poll challengers are very important. They're there to help ensure that the law is being followed. It's just one of those transparency, especially accountability factors. And so we have poll watchers, poll challengers in our precincts as well. And then, on election night, we get the results transmitted to our office lots changed, so I'm trying to not get too deep in the weeds, but after the polls close, our election inspectors in the precincts they'll close the polls, they'll print out the results tapes. Again, the public is welcome to see and watch that. And they take the ballots from the tabulator and place them in a certified and secured, sealed up ballot container and deliver those, Republican and a Democrat, to the local clerks, where they will keep custody of those ballots. Along with the ballot containers, they get what's called the election materials. If there's one thing, again, I want to stress in terms of our elections in Michigan, it's paper, paper, paper. We vote on paper ballots. We have paper results tapes. We have paper poll books. We have paper list of voters. And all those materials are sealed up in triplicate. One goes to the local clerk, one goes to me as the county clerk, and then a third goes to the chief judge of the probate. So again, these materials are in triplicate form. They're going to 3 different parties. They're sealed up. They're delivered by the clerks themselves on election night. And at that time, that's when they're also delivering the results from the precincts. They're basically for us to be able to report out to the public. When it comes to absentee voting, reporting those results, we have a virtual private network, a secure network where those results are emailed to my office, and then we upload the results onto our election management system so that the candidates, the press, and the public have results as soon as we get them. So there's a lot that goes into that, and that's election day, that's election night. Again, my office is open to the public on election night for individuals, for candidates, for the public to be able to watch what's going down. And then after election, this is kind of my favorite part, because it's probably the local clerk's favorite part too, because they're kind of done at that point. But after the election, we begin what's called the county canvass, and I believe that is the crown jewel of our process in terms of ensuring the election was accurate. That's where the chief judge of the probate court will deliver his envelopes of paper materials to the bipartisan board of county canvassers. It's made up of 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats that are appointed, and they serve a ministerial role where they will review the chief judge's materials against the county clerk's, my materials. I'll deliver them too. So if there was ever any inclination that a county clerk may, take some of these materials or try to, have some nefarious plan with them, there's always that second copy in the canvas. And then should they not match, that's when they can go to the triplicate at the county or at the local clerk's office. So the board of canvassers goes through all of these paper materials for every single precinct in Kent County. We have 252 precincts in our county, plus an absentee counting board. So we basically have 500 precincts, and these canvassers are going through the results tapes to make sure what's on the tape matches what is on the reports that we reported out. They're going through the list of voters to make sure that the number of ballots we issued match the number of voters that we had come through, and they're just making sure that all of these processes, that everything matches to again ensure that the votes are accurate, that the results are accurate. It's only after the board of canvassers finishes their job and certifies the election that results are official. So you'll never hear me say after the election, the results are in and we have a winner. Because it's just yes, truly it is a process, and vote totals can and do change in our canvass. Sometimes there may be for example, there may be a batch of absentee votes that didn't transmit when the local clerk sent them over. Well, again, this is why the canvas is so important, because we're going through those records and we notice that. And then we can make sure that the precinct comes in, they get retabulated, everything balances out. Sometimes ballots don't match the number of voters. A lot of times when we go and try and find the reason. There's paper copies of notes in each precinct, and a lot of times those notes will be there to explain why. Most of the time what we found is that a voter had to spoil their ballot. So they returned the ballot to the election worker, they were issued a new ballot, and so that would explain why there was one more ballot issued than was tabulated. So that's the canvas. And then after that, there's a whole process for potential recounts. If there's an aggrieved party, aggrieved candidate, there's the recount process, which I believe is very important. Again, all of these things, when combined together, they make for Michigan to be a model in terms of election integrity and security and just how we do things. And then that final step in the process afterwards is audits. The counties often, actually after every election, Kent County, we generally have 10 precincts that are randomly selected by the state that the county clerks go and we audit those local jurisdictions. Karen, I think you had one last election, didn't you?
Yeah.
So that's where we'll go through all of the absentee ballot applications, all of those kind of things, and including a hand tally of the ballots in that precinct, just once again to ensure that the election was accurate. So that's audit is just kind of to make sure that the processes and laws were followed in terms of the administration of the election. And then certainly, of course, we have the judicial avenues, and that's kind of where the clerks and I, that's beyond our role, but again, the judicial process plays a role in our elections as well. I think it's important that candidates, campaigns, that they're able to take advantage of every legal opportunity to ensure the elections are accurate and that they were done properly. So that's the process in a nutshell, and truly it is in a nutshell. So I know I gave you a lot, but elections are complicated and they're kind of supposed to be. But truly, I say what seems the most archaic and what seems the most out of fashion is paper. But yet I cannot stress enough how important the paper ballot is. Those become available for public inspection. They're open to the public, they're public record. Not how you voted is public, but that you voted is public. But these ballots, they're paper matters because there's always a trail that you can go back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Chris, you worked on Proposal 2, and now that this is really being fully implemented, what benefits do you think this brought us to the election process? Clerk Lyons, Posthumus referenced some of the early voting and some of the no reason absentee. What should we expect in coming out of Proposal 2, and how will that build trust in the overall process?
A few things, just a comment to piggyback on what the clerk said. Michigan has been a model for a long time in terms of its election process, even with our voter ID law, and having a strong voter ID law. It's been the law in Michigan for a long time. It's now enshrined in our Constitution and guaranteed as part of our Constitution. So again, I think it's a very key part of our election process. That, and I just want to thank Lisa and the other clerks that are here, and anybody else who else has volunteered like yourself as an election day worker. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thank you.
We also have Betsy is our elections clerk in my office.
Yeah. So thank you. I cannot tell you how important those roles are and how important everybody plays an important role. This is a human-driven process. Democracy is driven by all of us, and if we don't go and participate in democracy, the fundamental cornerstone of our country, then what are we doing as Americans? Volunteer, step up, be part of the process, because you're part of the checks and balances that we have. You receive training, you see the process that is in place, and you see the security levels that are there. I graduated law school in 2000. I thought on election night, when you saw the results on TV, I thought those were the results, right? I think most Americans thought those were the results. But through Bush v. Gore in all the subsequent years, and as we've gotten more social media and more, bifurcated and all of those things, we've learned, I think a little bit for the better, learned that that is not the be-all, end-all, and there's checks and balances, and votes do, the vote count can shift from the unofficial results until you get to the official results. But all along the way, there are checks and balances. And so Proposal 2 really aimed to do 2 or 3 different things. And one was enshrining the right to vote and the voter ID law in the Constitution, and protect all voters from being harassed or being limited in their access to vote. Second, what it did do, and I think one of the key benefits of it, is having some early voting. Now, that doesn't come without problems. I've got a lawsuit right now that's dealing with fees associated with recounts and early voting sites over in Oakland County. So it's not without issues that have to be, there's some things that have to be worked through in terms of process and making sure that those things are thought through. I'm hoping personally that maybe we can shift some timing along so clerks aren't crunched and rushed in the process. The time between our primary and when we're getting ballots ready for the general election is almost no time, right? So there's things like that still have to work out. But I would challenge anyone to explain to me why making it easier to vote for Americans and registered elected people to participate in our democracy is a bad thing. It is a good thing. It doesn't mean we compromise our voter ID law. No, we didn't do that. We didn't compromise our security. No, we didn't compromise our checks and balances. The three system in terms of paper ballots, the paper trail, the balancing of precincts after the election, the bipartisan canvassing board at the county level, plus at the state level that gets checked, then the post-election audits, and then obviously the judicial system. Now, my law firm would probably criticize me for saying this, but I think lawyers and we as officers of the court have to do a better job of not being used by campaigns as just another tool for political messaging or unnecessary challenges. And that's not pointing at one side or the other. Everybody does it, all sides do it, and everybody's looking for an advantage. There are meritorious challenges. There are times when things, a misinterpretation or a misapplication of the law can happen. And those you should be able to go through the judicial process. But things that don't have, we're all held to a standard, and when we sign those, there's a court rule on it, that we believe it's being brought in good faith, not designed to annoy, harass, lengthen, and is formed on a good faith basis of existing law and facts. And so by signing that, that's what lawyers, we have to be held to those standards. And there are times to do it. God bless, go do it, hire me, I'll hand out my cards, right? But, so, getting back to Proposal 2, I think the voter ID in the Constitution, great thing. Making sure our men and women who serve in the military or Americans who live overseas, make sure that their votes get counted. And by providing that extended time where they get their votes counted, matters so much. And it doesn't matter, to me it doesn't matter if it means that maybe it didn't make a difference in the election one way or another. But fundamentally knowing that your vote counts still, that for no fault of your own, you're serving overseas, defending our democracy, And because, I don't know, a slow boat getting out of the Middle East doesn't get our mail to us, on time if it's postmarked county, right? And so I think that is extremely important. I think the early AV processing and tabulating is huge for it. It allows us, and it increases, I think, voter confidence in our systems because you're getting results sooner and you can count those AV ballots sooner. During COVID, I think one of the good things, if anything good that comes out of COVID, was that people began to see the value actually in allowing you guys to do some pre-processing. They didn't allow you to do tabulating, but at least you could get things organized and open and check signatures and all of those things. It was great. And allowing those things to happen, I think those are really some of the highlights there. And then I think defining how post-election audits can be done and clarifying that it's election professionals who are trained to do it, who understand the system and the equipment. Last thing I'll say is, again, I think where I started is, if you haven't volunteered, do it. Get educated. Go to your clerks. Talk to them. If you have any questions about it, find a time to talk to the clerk. They'll explain the whole system and walk you through it. And you learn so much and you see it and you volunteer. I've been deputized on election nights in various jurisdictions where you sit there and you've got an AV guy. I witnessed a guy who's got to be in his late 70s, early 80s, came in on election day, requested a ballot. They took his ID, they checked it, it was the guy, registered voter. They go back and they check the system. They're like, I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, but you already turned in your AV ballot 6 weeks ago. He's like, oh my God, you're right. I did do that. It wasn't an attempt to vote twice. It was the guy legitimately wanted to make sure he voted, didn't remember that he had already sent in his ballot 6 weeks prior, Shoot, I got 4 kids and full-time job and dogs and cats and craziness at my house. Mm-hmm. I can't remember things all the time. You can see my note cards are on a thank you note from my daughter. Daughter's birthday party from probably 6 years ago. I've got notes on it. So, people's lives are busy. And I think making it easier to vote, where you can vote when it's convenient for your lifestyle, whatever that may be, or your shift, if you're working, or whatever it may be, making those things easier, provided we're not compromising the integrity of our system. And I think we've accomplished that. I think Proposal 2, hopefully in maybe closer cooperation with our local clerks than maybe Proposal 2 was drafted and introduced. And for the record, I did not draft Proposal 2.
That's why I'll still be in the same room as you.
Right, I did not draft it. I helped make sure it got on the ballot and stayed on the ballot and all that kind of stuff, but I did not draft it. And I think some of the wrinkles that we see maybe could have got ahead of it. But I think, again, that's why it's important to have all stakeholders in the room who understand.
That's why we have these conversations, exactly.
So, hey, if I could put a plug in addition to Chris's plug on working the elections, you keep saying volunteer, and yes, it is a civic, it's one of those civic pride things, but you go to countyvotes.com, you can get an application, and you will get paid. It's not just, volunteering your time, but we recognize the magnitude of what we're asking individuals who work our elections to undergo. And that has value to it, and so we want to make sure.
I would say one other thing too. I think there was a lot of criticism in 2020, and you heard about Zuckerbucks and things like that. A couple of things I would say about that. One is, not all money that gets contributed to local governments, it's permissible for local governments to take charitable contributions. They do it all the time. There's nothing unlawful about that. Second, in the 2020 election, if you look at the contributions that came through the Center for Tech and Civic Life, which you go about 3 layers behind, the majority of the money did come, I think, from Mark Zuckerberg. But if you go and look at it, it was open to every community in Michigan and where other states that it was accepted and received by a lot of counties that either trend blue or trend red or in between. And then if you look at what the money was actually spent on, I represent the city of Flint. Flint spent it so they could buy a high-speed tabulator to actually, which they couldn't afford in their budget, to be able to process absentee ballots more quickly. Didn't change a single vote. What it allowed to do is to actually have a better, more accurate vote. And in COVID, I think a lot of it went to, the other thing, what got me thinking of it was workers, was being able to actually increase pay that the local municipalities couldn't afford to get people to come out during COVID and be there all day at polling locations. And so I think clarifying that and making it transparent, and so there isn't, you know, it's not the secret slush money getting, you know, buying around things, that it's legitimate upfront and everybody's aware of it, I think is important. And I think, you know, I would encourage more people to, Lord knows our legislature is not funding you guys enough. If private individuals want to provide more funding to local clerks, I think it's a great thing, you know?
Well, speaking of making sure we've got workers that
Yeah.
are out there being part of the process, Joe DeMarco, you went from being a voter to now actively involved in the process, and I'm dying to hear your story.
A skeptic voter.
Well, first of all, I'm very honored to be on this panel, so thank you very much for including me. I've always taken my voting as a privilege, and it's one that I have always taken very seriously. Let's see, prior to working elections, I always voted in person, and I was always interested in, you know, what's going on in this precinct, and who's doing what, and how they're doing it, and all that. And I think the first election that I was a part of was in 2012. And at that time, I didn't know very much at all, but I so enjoyed my experience there. I said to myself, this is something that I really want to learn and grow with and, you know, stay a part of. So I did, and I inquired about training and took a couple of classes, and then eventually I got my first election appointment. I was an inspector, and again, love the process. I love the people that you meet, and it's just also very interesting to me. And mind you, I'm a very process-oriented person. My whole life is scheduled around, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3. And that's really what kept me intrigued. And the more training that I got, the more I realized I want to learn even more and then apply the new things that I've learned to the next election. So since my 2012 first experience, I've become a trained and credentialed poll challenger, inspector, chairperson. I've worked in in-person voting, the absentee ballot count room, and now our first 9-day election process, which I thoroughly enjoyed. A little sidebar, it was so nice to be able to talk to voters as they were coming in, because the early voting 9-day process is all new, it's completely separate and different from that of election day. And people were so nice and happy to come in, and they were asking a lot of questions about this new process. And because it was not that busy all the time, we had the time to talk to the voters that explained, you know, here's what happened and here's what's going on. And, you know, they might have walked in a little skeptical, but they left happy and like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. And gee, it's nice to be here and be able to talk to people and see what's going on and what's happening. So from my experience, the people really enjoyed the 9-day process, and I look forward to working that again. But what I immediately saw when I began working was how one role led to the next and the next and the next. And because, like I said, I'm so process oriented, I pretty much became obsessed. I'm like, I can't wait to go to the next training and learn about the next role and then apply it in the next election, which I did. And one of the reasons why I love this work so much and find it so very interesting, it's kind of a progressive path where each role is connected to another. And having said that, I mean, the more you learn about the process, I've always felt the more confident you become in the process. And that's why I love this work. Having worked in, various townships in Kent, but I also worked in Wayne County, Macomb County, and Oakland County. And I am very comfortable and very confident in the processes that we here in Kent County practice. I've said, having other experiences, that we're the gold standard here. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Well said.
I just don't think that the other experiences I've had were as confident as what all I've had here in Kent. And that's why I love this work.
Well, thank you for your service too.
And if I could add to Joe, I think you're being a little modest too. She, after the 2020 election, she contacted our office with, I mean, you had genuine concerns and questions, and we so appreciate that. We want to meet people where they're at and walk them through the process, and you know, it's our job to answer these questions, and because it's important. This is how you build trust and confidence in the elections. But Joe, so we sat down with Joe, my elections director at the time, sat down with her. I spent some time with her and invited her to come to the canvas, watch how we do this. We explained the canvas process to her, and you've been to every single.
And then I became obsessed with the canvas.
She's been to every single canvas since, and in fact, she is now. We now tap her as an assistant canvasser when we canvass the results. So she's added a new role. Now she can't canvass anything, any precinct that she worked in, but yeah, it's just, Joe, your story, you know, from a skeptic to a believer to a participant is, you know, it's what gets us election officials up in the morning.
Thank you.
Yeah, I use it as an example, yourself and others that I know, as the best process if you have questions about the process is step up and volunteer. It's sort of like when I do, you know, I ref for my kids' sports, when I get the parents complaining on the sidelines. Take a whistle, step up, try officiating.
Yeah.
And so if you have concerns, participate. Work side by side by the workers, and you see, and you can probably attest, you know, I've done dozen recounts over the years, have been involved in, you know, all election day prep and all that kind of stuff for the last 20 years. And the errors that you see we're a human process, we're a human system. Paper and humans.
And all the more reason to have these multiple checks
Yep,
and balances.
is that those errors, people are not infallible, those things happen, but you talk about precincts being out of balance, out of whack. Most of the times it's somebody's been working there all day, they're tired at the end of the night, and maybe they made a mistake or put a 1 in the wrong column, or things like that. But because we have the checks and balances and the paper system, you can sort those things out, and most precincts get rebalanced. And when you're talking about things being unbalanced, you're not talking about somebody got, you know, 50 votes and 50 votes. It's 2, 3, 1. You know, I think even in Detroit, where you know notoriously people are concerned with, you know, most precincts, it's the most I've ever heard is like maybe 8. And maybe you guys know better. But I want to say there was like one precinct that had like 8. And then after they went through the poll book and worked everything out, I think it all got reduced to like there was one thing that they couldn't.
And that, I mean, that canvas process, if something doesn't balance, and we can't explain it from the record, from the notes in the poll book, or you know, there's no note that there was ballots spoiled, we will bring the local clerks back with the ballots in those precincts to retabulate it. I may have to turn this over to you if you're more familiar. I'm not entirely familiar with it, but you bring up the voter list, which I think is really important to talk about. You know, Chris and I don't know that we would agree much on anything in terms of policy or politics.
I'm pretty persuasive. I think I can
but we do agree on how important it is to make sure to make sure the public knows the process. And education transcends, you know, different party lines. It transcends different philosophies. So I really appreciate being up here. But when you're talking about, as he was talking about proposal 2, I believe the voter list is going to be that much more critical going forward, because one of these changes we really haven't touched on is essentially automatic ballots. As a provision of proposal 2 that voters passed, now a voter can sign an application and then check a box that they want to receive a ballot for every future election. In the past, we used to have applications that had to be signed, so even before we would issue the ballot, that signature would be checked against the signature in the voter file. So now with that that first step, that first verification going away, we really have to lean on a functioning voter file for our election administrators. We have to lean on a maintained and updated voter file. And admittedly, I don't play a huge role as county clerk in our voter list. I don't have the authority to add people. I don't even have the authority to remove people, even though I know every single person who dies and meets their maker in Kent County, literally in the office right next door, the cubicle right next door to our elections department. But again, part of this decentralization gives the ownership of our voter list to our local clerks and ultimately to the Secretary of State for maintenance and particularly purging. So, I don't have a lot to offer in terms of what I can do for the qualified voter file. The best I could get was I could get the legislature to pass a new law that requires county clerks to once a month flag voters in the qualified voter file who with the death records that we have in our own offices. So we'll flag those so that our local clerks can then go through their process and remove those deceased voters from the roll. That's as close as I could get to being able to purge those individuals who have deceased and don't belong on the list. What's going on with, and I don't know what that initiative is, but I do know that there are individuals who are, they're monitoring the voter rolls, and which are public. Our voter lists are public, and all you have to do is issue a FOIA. I would recommend to the local clerk. They probably are shaking their head right now, but again, they're their voters. It's their list. But it's I want to be careful that I would just urge our citizens.
Can one of you speak to a little bit of what laws are in place?
Well, I think the ultimate law in place is the First Amendment. And so when you're talking about misinformation, disinformation, deep fake, you're really operating within the awesome parameters of the First Amendment. And so we haven't seen, I know there's legislation being talked about. Admittedly, I haven't, everything is, we can attest, there's so much happening so fast, not just from these proposals, but from this legislature. I don't know where that's at and what they're doing with it at this point. But I think, again, the ultimate responsibility or the ultimate way to combat misinformation is exactly what we're doing here right now, and that's education. Education combats misinformation. And it's difficult, and sometimes we're not going to be able to get through to everybody, but it's just really important that there are people that you can trust to ask these questions or willing to go and share the truth with the public.
Joe.
People saying, I heard this, I saw that, this is fraud, what's going on, blah, blah, blah. So I take a deep breath and I ask them, well, explain to me what you heard or what you saw. Many people who were serving as challengers, and they knew a little bit about the process, so that gave them the reason for being there in the first place in the precincts. But they would explain the situation, what they witnessed, and what their questions were, and I would ask them, who did you talk to about it? Did you get like the inspector's name, the chairperson's name, what was the issue? And was it resolved to your satisfaction? Yes, no, but then I would further explain whatever it was. Well, here's why you thought that wasn't correct or whatever. And there's a policy or procedure that follows that, and here's the way that would be ultimately handled. And I always go back and offer them the opportunity to visit the crown jewel, the canvas, because as I always say, if the election work is a college degree, the canvas is your master's degree. And that's where, again, they welcome the public to come and sit with them and watch the audit and review process of every single precinct involved in Kent County. It's the review of all of our election work. And they take breaks, the canvassers take breaks. They're a wonderful body of people, as Lisa said, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. They work so wonderfully well together in perfect harmony, even when things got, I mean, nothing is perfect, but there's been problem areas where, again, you had to call the clerk in and say, we need you to come down here and, figure this or that out. But they sit there very harmoniously, and they work together, they talk amongst each other. They welcome questions or situations that the public or an election worker experience so that they could explain them. And that's the best way to do it. But I always close with, so next election, get in there and work it so,
Yeah.
so you'll understand it better. Because what you saw at that moment, something happened before and something happened afterwards, and they need to put it all together. So that's the best way to find out.
And to kind of touch on what you did mention, AI and deep fakes, and that's admittedly something that I'm still trying to get my head around. I think we all are.
Yep.
Because the ability to be completely replicated and use a voice, a face, a personality,
Signature.
and put words into a whole other person's body. That is something that we all just. I mean, it could put me in the fetal position underneath underneath a desk but we all have to start becoming more aware of it, and just a little vigilance goes a long way. So with when you're going to deal with this come election season and all these campaign ads and things like that, but if you're hearing something from an election official, whether it's, hey, this is Lisa Postumus-Lyons, I just want to let you know that we had to close the polls early because there was an emergency. If you hear something that sounds official because it's using an official's name, voice, face, before you act, just pick up the phone, make that phone call. To make sure what you're hearing is legitimate. When it comes to posting, when in doubt, don't. Just make sure that what you're putting out in social media is accurate. Make sure what information is coming to you from unfortunately, it makes me so angry, what should be a trusted source, somebody taking advantage of that public trust and using it in a nefarious way. Just let's all just talk together, communicate.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd say. One is I'll start with the advice I give my daughter. Put your damn phone down. Point blank. If it's on social media, don't believe it. I don't care what side it is, and it's not even side, Democrat or Republican. Nobody wants to undermine our democracy more than our foreign adversaries. And all it takes is to sow the seeds of doubt. And it's not necessarily to favor one candidate or another. They don't particularly care, I don't think. It's to just sow doubt and turn us all on each other. Put the damn phone down. Trust your local election officials. If you have a question about something, go to a source or somebody you know and trust, and make sure that they know what they're talking about and have it from trusted sources. AI and the deep fakes is super scary, and it doesn't even have to be impersonating Lisa, for example. You could get a call that sounds like your husband and leaves you a message that might not be true. I mean, it is super scary out there, the extent that they can do and what they can do, and I shudder, and I really hope, and that's why I think the best piece of defense is education, is arming yourselves with education about the process, and not really put your phones down, rely on trusted news sources and media outlets that you have local. I'm not saying you've got to listen to CNN or Fox or MSNBC or whatever. Go to your local news station, and if they're not reporting it, then it's probably not happening and not accurate. And so, so those things, I think it's really important to go to the local level and get your local news, or go to your local elected officials who you trust about whether that information is accurate.
A couple other questions from the audience. Is there anything in current state law that allows counties and/or individual township municipalities to stop using machines and going back to hand counting?
No, nope, the law requires the use of election machines, and I have to tell you, I'm glad it does. I'm glad it does because that helps ensure that our elections are way more accurate than it could ever be if you hand counted a ballot. Maybe run race, sure, but when you're talking about a full-blown election and you're putting humans who have to, I mean, you tally, you know, one race is in one precinct. It's a huge undertaking, and humans are fallible. Now, again, that's why we test the equipment beforehand. That's why we keep the paper ballots just in case there was something with the equipment. Again, the enemy isn't our election equipment, and I'll tell you, in order to even use our election tabulators, they have to go through a very rigorous process, both from the federal level at the EAC, all the way through the state level, which I think is the JEC. And in order to even be eligible, they have to meet certain standards. So they have to meet these security and standards at the federal level. But again, because Michigan is unique and we've got these decentralized elections, and we don't do fractionated voting or ranked choice voting. You know, we have to make, at this time, we have to make sure that whatever equipment that's going to be used can function under the laws of our state. And then, in order to select the equipment, the state doesn't tell us which equipment to have because, you know, what works in Kent County might not work in Kalkaska County. So we take those approved election equipment or election systems, and the county clerk is responsible for making the decision what election system is going to be used in that county. And that is done in consultation with our local clerks.
I say you wanna talk about hand voting, why machines are better. Go home, you and your spouse, count all the pairs of socks and underwear you have in the house, see if you come up with the same number. And then go through the neighborhood and count all your neighbors' socks and underwear and see if you both come up with the same number.
Now, I can see.
It's not gonna happen.
Now, if you don't have paper ballots, that's a whole other story. And I'm not really
Yep.
familiar with how that works in other states where they have, you know, electronic voting machines and they're just punching an iPad and walking out. Again, paper, paper, paper. The paper ballots are king.
Joe?
Can I also add that I'm not sure how much of the public is aware that all of your township clerk's office, as well as Kent County clerk's office, posts information on public accuracy tests, which is the demonstration of the tabulators, how they're programmed. It's the pre-election security process that anybody is welcome to go to, and you can ask the questions that you have them, if you have doubts or whatever, how does this work, how is that configured? It's all right there, and it's open to the public to come and see and touch and feel. And now, starting for the 9-day early voting process, several townships even offered the demonstration of the new equipment, because early voting is different than election day voting, and they're using different equipment. So I know, like, for example, Joel at the city of Grand Rapids, I think he did a couple of Saturdays in a row, all day on a Saturday. Well, he had all the new equipment out on display, and everybody was welcome. He put, you know, ad after ad after ad out there, and it was wonderful to see. I mean, he lets you, here, you want to come and try it? Like, the instructions were there, somebody else would walk you through it and let you actually do it. I don't know how much more transparent you can get.
My concern is Grand Rapids. I have, like Joe, I've worked at ABCB, and I spoke to women who are cornerstones. You know, the people are all great, you know. I trust the people, but the woman said, I don't understand, we used to validate signatures. We used to validate them here against the poll books. That chain of custody is broke. We put the total trust back into our clerks' offices. I don't understand, okay, clerks working underneath the clerk, what authority they have, especially when you get into the big municipalities. And there's no oversight. You don't have a poll challenger or an individual standing there verifying this, where in the past, especially in ABCB, remember, large percentage of our ballots are now sent through ABCB.
And those materials are public. I mean,
It's huge.
the applications, the envelopes, we keep those, and they're part of the audit.
And the other part of the
That's part
process,
of the
though,
audit, but that's not the day of when it actually
but the
comes
day
in your
for
ballot.
Grand Rapids, as they're receiving 2,000 ballots a day, they don't just throw them into a pile
No.
at that point and then send them to the AV County Board. They have to receive them in the qualified voter file where they verify the signature, and the person who's in the qualified voter file has taken an oath and is, has to still meet the standards set by the state for verifying a signature, which, I mean, we are not signature experts,
Right.
but we have to go by the standards set by the state.
And training.
That was my question. You use the same process in your
Correct.
township.
When the voting experience in early voting is essentially the same as it is election day voting, and so some of those things in terms of ensuring voter integrity and those kind of things, some of those measures, such as making sure we're having multiple bipartisan Republican and Democratic election inspectors, the ability for poll challengers to be present and fulfill and conduct their role in the process. Those are kind of all in the same vein as election day. And then essentially when you're talking about the end of the day, because we've got to go 8 days, right? With using the same tabulators and the same facilities, they basically treat each day of early voting as its own individual election day, and so you're dealing with the removal of the ballots from the secure from the secure tabulator bin, placed into a certified and sealed ballot container, and that again is signed by the Republican and the Democrat, and then that's taken to an area that has to be locked up and secured at the end of the night, and then they start it over again the next day.
Can I add one thing to
Go
that?
ahead, and then I got something.
In addition to that, the extra security measures are, because we're using one facility for 9 days, the equipment is every single piece of the equipment, the ballot on demand machines, the tabulators, the electronic poll books, all of the tabulators, every single component are locked and sealed, some by white tags, number tags, some by red number tags. Those numbers on each seal for each piece of equipment are recorded the night before or the night of closing. Those numbers are recorded by me, the chairperson, along with the city official. And then in the morning, we're there earlier and we are re-verifying that the same seals are on each one of those pieces again in the morning with the same number. And somebody else besides me is signing off on that. And then when the election inspectors come in for the day, and again, Republican and Democrat, they're all looking at all of that before they take their oath, and then they sign their morning procedures.
So if I can just real quick, I'd say a couple of things. One is absentee voting is not new. And the process verifying the ballots that come in, not new. Process has been around for how long? 40, 50, 60 years? All of that, right? This is not new. The ability to put your name and not have to say I'm going to be out of town to request absentee ballots, that's new. Being able to put yourself, if you're under 65, was it? 62? Something 65, to be able to put yourself on a permanent AV list, that's new. So voting by absentee is not a new concept. Voting by mail, not a new concept. All the security measures that were in place 40, 50 years ago, before everybody is making claims that they make, were in place, and they're still in place now. If anything, we've enhanced it and had it be better. And I'll just note, state of Oregon has voted by mail for 30 years exclusively. You can't even show up in person.
Easy knows.
I do. I take my kids every year. I go in person with my kids and we take our pictures. I'm a big believer in it. I do. My point is that voting by mail is no less secure. We have those measures in place and the procedures in place than in-person voting.
To touch on with the absentee, you mentioned all the things that are not new. We've got a lot of attention on drop boxes. Drop boxes are not new. Did all three of you have a drop box prior to 2020?
Yes.
Yes.
And your voters utilize that drop box?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
again, not a new phenomenon. I think just with COVID, and the influx, the increased use of absentee voting by people who maybe never had before, it was new to them, a whole new experience to them. But it doesn't mean it was new to us. But what I will say, some things that resulted, some positive things that resulted from all of that is our drop boxes are more secure. They're, we've got video monitoring. They're locked up. When you're talking about removing the ballots from the absentee ballot drop box, that's done. That's done by individual, an election administrator who's taken the oath. They're signed for it. They record. Again, it's a chain of custody type situation where when a clerk or election administrator removes those ballots from the drop box and they bring them to their office, those ballot numbers are recorded and the date is recorded, and who extracted those ballots from the drop box is all recorded to keep a record of who had those ballots at what time and when those ballots were removed.
Could I add to that for a minute? Just to appease it, the gentleman in the red, I don't want you to walk out of here feeling discouraged or
Oh, no, I
or
don't feel discouraged.
addressed. I want
at
you
all.
to walk out of here satisfied.
Yeah.
What Lisa just explained, again, that's the process. And you've got three clerks here who have drop boxes right either inside your office or right outside. Now, you empty those drop boxes every day, right? And if today you collected 100 ballots, are you going to not do anything with those sealed envelopes until election day, or are you going to start your signature validation process right then? So what the public doesn't see, what you might not realize, you probably don't because you're not satisfied. You think the chain of custody is
I
broken.
do, Joe.
Okay,
I do know the
okay.
process.
But
I've
know
worked the process.
that
I
they
understand
begin their
completely.
process. They're not
Yes.
opening the ballots at all.
Absolutely.
But okay, you sign your outer envelope. There's a number on there, and then up in the upper right-hand
Correct.
corner, there's a little box that says like for clerk or something like that. After they've taken that ballot, checked your signature, the number on the ballot, they're going to sign off on it, and they're going to lock it up and secure it till election day,
Correct.
or till you start your process.